67,485,000 words in. That's a long time. That's nearly the same length as Bridget Jones' Diary. The book, not the film. Yeah, But that took a while to get there, over a year, because I did test drafts, I spent a lot of time, and I did other things, like I've just released a song, I've published a poetry book, and I've had exams, and I've only just turned 18, so no excuses here. I just want to give you an update on where I am in the novel, where I'm going next, and what I've done so far to get to this stage. So my novel's called Osyth, and that comes from the village I live in, St. Osyth. Don't stalk me, don't go on Google Maps, no, stop. But it's based on an Anglo-Saxon myth of the local area, and an actual person called Saint Osyth, because saints, you know, are religious figures. Google it. But yes, there's a whole story to do with Vikings and stuff like that. And I remember learning it in primary school, actually, only that was very...
She wanted to dedicate her life to prayer and become a nun. Her parents did not agree with this choice and betrothed her to Sibert, the East Saxon Christian king, in order to form an alliance. However, while her
very cartoon version. So when I remembered that, and I was watching a series called The Last Kingdom on Netflix and Game of Thrones, I thought, cool, I'd love to do something sort of historical and epic and with people stabbing each other. So I thought, hang on, but I want to do something that hasn't been done before. And it's good, you know, to write about something you know well and something that is a story you feel only you can tell. I mean, obviously, there's other people that could tell it. I'm just going to tell it in my own way better. So I started off by researching, and I discovered that the records in the 600 AD weren't very thorough. So, you know, I didn't get to look through what Osyth had posted on Twitter, that sort of thing. So I had to sort of use my imagination a lot, because lots of different sources and lots of different records show completely different things. But lots of people would be like, so how did you know what to do? Well, I sort of just used my creative license and I put all the sources together. I got all the historical facts and I chose which ones I liked and which ones I didn't. The story, you could go on Wikipedia and find out in like a sentence, but that would ruin the whole book, so don't do that. But also you could do that and still enjoy the book, because I've written it really, really well. At least, I mean, looking back, it's not too bad, but after a few drafts, it will be better. After lots of intensive research and then ignoring the research to build a good story, I decided to get what I'd found out and put it into the 3-act structure model. And there's a model called Save the Cat, which the books are really good and it helps you come up. So it's basically splits it down into 3 acts, and then those 3 acts, which are commonly in stories beginning, middle and end, they're broken down even further to what's commonly seen in books and TV shows and films, to like theme stated, set up, catalyst, break into, B story, fun and games, midpoint, bad guys close in, all is lost, dark nights of soul, break into 3, don't get bored, finale, final image. And that breaks down like the whole story into different things that should happen. Obviously the idea is to use that as a guideline and then break it, which is what I did. I planned the story using that, and then I broke it down even further. I used something called Padlet to have all these different cards with scenes in of what happens when in each chapter, so different columns, and I went across and I went changing them colour as I finished them, and that was a really good way, because then I could see my progress through the novel and I had the whole story mapped out. Only going through it, you realise that you're going in a lot more detail and you're adding bits in as you go along, you're changing it to what feels right, and I did that, and now I've expanded it so much. But I am near the end, and I know where the end's going to go. It's just I want to make that route to that end point as satisfying and fulfilling as possible for the reader and for me, because when you come to the end of something, it's heartbreaking. I might have to write another poetry book about it. A moment of silence, please. Buy my poetry book on Amazon. In January 2019, I started doing a test draft, which involved me starting writing chapter 1 and then reviewing it, see how it was. I showed it with other people. Other people seemed to like it. In fact, they seemed to really like it. I didn't. I was finding it really hard to get through, and it was because I was writing it in first person, past tense, and I found that really difficult to try and stay inside the brain of a character. It's something I like to do, but I like to do with shorter fiction. Completely started again in March. That took me a month or so. It was worth it because now I'm comfortable in the writing style. I can explore more. I can use all the techniques I want to. I can tell the story how I want to tell it. And you've really got to make mistakes in order to get to the end point. And that's the whole thing with writing. You learn every time you write. Every time I write new fiction, it's better than before. I'm going to be completely honest here. Sometimes finding motivation to write is really difficult. But my technique is sort of not to force myself. Because if I don't feel like it and I go and sit in front of a laptop, not many words will come out. And I can do that, but there's no need. I don't have a deadline, and I've got plenty of time. So it's better to write more on days when you do feel like it than force yourself on days when you don't. That's just my personal advice. It changes from person to person. If you're writing a long form fiction, you want to remember what's happening in the story. And if every time you got to sit down and write, you've got to reread and then learn what's happening next, it takes a long time. But what I did today, I'm not going to scroll and find it because it's a 200-page document. What I did today is when I finished writing that section, I went and made a note of where I'm going next. I want to show you something that really worked well for me. In April, I got a calendar template online. I wrote in how many words I wrote a day, and then next to it I drew smiley faces and ticks to sort of gauge how I felt about that. And that was good to holding yourself accountable, because I really wanted to spend... In April, I knew that I was going to have a month of not having to do anything, so I wanted to set myself a routine. That worked well for April, but then in May I focused on the song and I took a break. I did radio interviews, and now again in June, it's July now, but in June I didn't do so well because I lost that motivation. But I think as I approach the end, I needed a break out to just recalibrate and think, how do I really want to end this? How do I feel about the story? How do I feel about how I've written it? And it was necessary, but my job now is I know that I'm really, really close to the end, and I will come to the end of the first draft. And that's sad, because then you've told the story. But editing is just as much telling the story as writing it initially. Because you take that story that everyone, only you know, and then you tell it and tell it and tell it until you find the best way of telling it. So that's my next job. And I will share how I'm getting on with the editing, because that's something I find difficult. It's more patience. I'm really eager to get to the end, but I think I've got a lot more self-discipline this time. With this novel, it's such a longer conventional novel that I'm excited for people to read it. And I hope that anybody sees that I'm no one special. I just worked hard. Anyone can write, anyone can be an excellent writer, but all you have to do to be a good writer is to let yourself improve. You've got to be really attached when you write something, but once you finish, step back, have a look at it, and then write something else, and then look at what you've just written and look what you wrote last year, and you'll find you get better. And that puts you in the best position to write your best work yet. I hope you enjoyed watching me talk about Osyth and my journey next. What I want to do next is I want to share some other experiences on how I publish it and the whole journey to do with that. So thank you for watching, and take care, have a lovely week, and if you want some music to listen to, stream Unsent by Shabs. As I say, I co-wrote it and she's a great songwriter and singer, so please support that song too. Lots of love, goodbye.
I left it on scent, why did I let it fade?